computer.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right. Hi, guys. And I am here with Mandy. So, Mandy is the owner of MH Performance in Perth. She has a team of 7 coaches. It is one of Perth's biggest female performance facility. That's fucking awesome. We help women break through gut hormone metabolic dysfunction who feel let down by conventional medical systems, and are usually told that their symptoms are normal through functional nutrition, supplementation, strength training, mindset, and behavior change. Mandy has a master's in sports science, master's in human nutrition, strength coach for netball, AFL, and combat sports athletes. That's awesome. Well done.
I know
Hi.
we do a lot. We do a lot. It's a blessing and a curse.
Awesome. So basically, I wanted you to come on today, selfishly as well, because there's obviously a few things that I want to know, but also just to highlight a few of the common issues within hormones, the gut, women's health in general, and just to kind of troubleshoot, I guess, with some practical applications with diet and nutrition. So I guess I want to start with, like, how did you get into this? Like, what is your origin story? What is your background?
Yeah, so I'm actually a strength coach first and foremost. So I actually went to uni and was actually studying PE teaching. And then I kind of got to the end of that and was kind of thinking this might actually not be for me. And then a strength and conditioning internship popped up. So I applied for that, not really knowing what it was, and then just fell in love with working with athletes. So for me, I always thought like I was going to go through the pipeline of, working in professional sport, being a strength and conditioning coach, and just working with high level athletes. And then I ended up running into a bunch of health issues. So during my undergrad, which I was like karate, doing Muay Thai, doing bikini competitions, doing or trying to. I did 2 of those in another lifetime. It feels like a completely different person now. And ran and doing my undergrad, plus working 2 jobs, plus doing my internship. So all of this stuff going on, I obviously ran into a ton of health issues, particularly around my gut. So chronic bloating, chronic gut issues, chronic even hormonal issues. My period was all out of whack, really low energy. Like my rap sheet of symptoms was insane. So that kind of just led me on a path of like trying to find out what was going on. I suffered for 6 years without getting any answers. So I was just seeing doctors, naturopaths, different coaches, like trying to get all these answers. And it was just coming back with like, everything's normal, you're fine. This is just IBS. And I was like, this cannot be normal. Like I literally physically can't live like this. So for me, I just kept fighting. I was like, nah, I'm going to find the answer. I'm going to keep finding it. It took me 6 years before I found it. I was doing a few courses with Dan Garner, who's an absolutely phenomenal functional health and nutrition coach, works with a lot of UFC athletes and lives in Canada. So he came here, did a few seminars. I did those and followed him forever. And I just thought, oh my God, like I need someone that understands female hormones, understands the gut, but also can work with fighters, because I was fighting Muay Thai at the time, which was very difficult to find. So I reached out to him. He ended up putting me through a bunch of functional testing, stool tests, urine tests, blood tests. I think, I can't remember if I did a hair test or not. And at this point I was like, what if this, I've been told for 6 years that there's nothing wrong with me. What if this comes back and there's nothing? Anyway, it came back, and a saliva test as well, actually, and the mountain of problems, like even within my saliva test, which was looking at cortisol throughout the day and a bunch of other things, he was already been able to identify all these gut issues just from that. Everything came back just flagging. I had H. pylori infection, which is a stomach infection in the gut, low stomach acid. I had chronic leaky gut. I had a range of nutrient deficiencies, estrogen dominance, low progesterone, just the absolute works. And I was just like relieved. I was like, oh my God,
we found something wrong.
like when I spoke to him, he was like, oh my God, like, I'm so sorry, like all this stuff's going on. And I was like, oh my God, I'm actually so happy that I've actually got an answer, and now we can actually work through this. We can actually start fixing this and get me feeling better. So it took me 2 years of a lot of nutrition, supplementation. Obviously, I was fighting and training really hard at the time, so that was definitely a stressor that kind of delayed the progress. But got there in the end, and now don't have any gut issues. Pretty much all of that stuff's gone for me now, and I'm in the best possible physical and mental health from dealing with that. So that kind of sparked obviously I was fighting so much to figure out what was wrong with me, and then I started doing personal training, and naturally I was just attracting girls very similar, had similar issues, and was able kind of to solve them pretty easily. And I was like, okay, cool. And then over time, I started working with, I guess, more and more girls, and more and more issues were coming about. So I kind of was like, I need to do more education around this. So enrolled in the Institute of Health to learn more about blood work and actually looking at it on a functional level, especially after I did all that functional testing. I was like, I want to know how to read this, because I've been told for 6 years that there's nothing wrong with me. And all these tests that you did, I've never been offered from anywhere else. And I want to be able to do that. So spent a lot of years now. I think we've looked at well over 500 bloods, dozens of stool tests, urine tests as well, to actually, and cross-correlating that with symptoms to find the underlying cause. So although I'm still a strength coach first and foremost, we still work with athletes. For me now, I have such a personal association with working with women who are really struggling, can't get any answers, and actually finding that underlying root kind of cause, and then tackling that from a holistic perspective, where we are looking at nutrition, supplementation, mindset, behaviors, their history, their training, their thought process, to get them where they kind of want to be.
Yeah, awesome. And so you work, you own the gym or the center, and that's one of the biggest in Perth.
Yeah, so we've got, in terms of our space, I probably wouldn't say we're the biggest, but in terms of the quantity of females we work with, there's nobody working with the amount of women that we work with in terms of female athletes and female gen pop as well. So we are very female oriented. We do train some males, usually the girls, the boyfriends of the girls we train, or our fighters, our combat guys as well. We've got the gym, so we do a lot of personal training and group coaching, but we also have a very big online base as well. And the online stuff's really where, and our personal training is really where we're tackling these health issues too. And originally, just like every personal trainer, I started girls coming to me for body composition, which they still do. That's still definitely their goal. But now we're definitely working with more girls coming to us with all of these health issues. They still have those body composition goals, but we have to kind of say to them, we need to pop this to the side. For now, we need to get your health in order. We need to get you feeling better, and then we can really focus on that, which sometimes is definitely a hard conversation to have. A lot of girls can be really focused on just wanting to be leaner, just wanting to lose fat, and health is often actually secondary to their body composition goals. But it's much easier to get fat off and build muscle tissue when the body is healthy.
Yeah, exactly. And I want you to talk into that a little bit more, because I guess that's probably the issue that a lot of people see in the industry, is people come and they're like, I just want to lose weight, but underlying that they're not healthy. And why does the body need to be in a optimal position to be able to liberate that fat?
Well, if we're nutrient deficient, we're going to struggle with energy production. For example, we need B vitamins to go into the citric acid cycle to produce energy, so we can train hard, so we can get that stimulus. We need iron for our thyroid to function optimally. Vitamin D, we need all of these nutrients for our metabolism to work properly, our hormones to work properly, our gut to function, for our neurotransmitters. And if we are nutrient depleted, we're going to run into all those issues. It's going to make it really difficult. And at the end of the day, we're training in the gym to create a stimulus. That's all we're kind of doing in there. But outside is where we're having that adaptation period, where we're going to build muscle tissue, where we're going to lose body fat. But if you're coming in and you've got all this fatigue, all these symptoms, you're not able to train hard, you're not able to get that output, you've been under eating for years or yo-yo dieting for years, and your metabolism has down-regulated, then you're going to have a really difficult time getting fat off. And it's just going to end up being kind of a cycle for you. So it's if you're feeling shit let's get you feeling good. And what we find anyway is when we work on people's health and we fix these issues, they end up dropping. They end up dropping as they get healthier, as we're giving the body the nutrients for the thyroid to work properly, for the hormones to work properly, for the gut to function optimally. So you're going to the bathroom every single day. Once they're doing that, you know, they're going to drop anyway. And we want to get them into that position where we can really focus on that. So while we are working with someone's health, we're usually reverse dieting them in the process, because it's like, okay, we want to get you ready to be able to go into a deficit. But just like most girls come to us, they're eating 1,000, 1,200 calories. And it's like, well, where do you really want us to go here?
Yeah.
Because you want to drop to 800, like we're, you know, getting into dangerous territory where you're eating below your basal metabolic rate. We're going to run into issues. You're going to be burning less calories during exercise, at rest. We're going to downregulate the digestive system. We're going to be ramping up stress hormones, downregulating thyroid hormones, running into potential issues with your cycle, all just to try and lose body fat. And if it's like not working, it's like, well, why would we just keep going lower? Why would we keep ramping up training? If you want to get somewhere you've never been before, you're going to have to do something you've never done before. And that may be reverse dieting, fixing your health, getting you feeling better, and then focusing on that.
Yeah, perfect. And I think like from my experience, a lot of people that come to me that are like say that they're eating, you know, 1,200, they're not really eating 1,200. Do you find like they're probably eating 1,200, 3,000, 3,000, and you know, at the end of the day, it's about just like that consistency, and then that consistency and health driving results.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you're eating 1,000, 1,200 calories, you're going to binge at some point. Like your body is so depleted. So then Monday to Friday, it might be very easy for them to stick to it. But then on the weekend, they're eating 3,000, 4,000 calories. And then your average calorie intake for the week is probably in a surplus. Yeah. And then you're wondering why you're not able to lose body fat. And there's even in those big binges or when you're eating those surplus, that's usually going to be food that's pro-inflammatory. You know, we're not eating like 3,000 calories of sweet potato. We're going and we're eating pizza. We're eating, you know, pasta, macros, whatever it is, chocolate, lollies, all that kind of stuff that you've been restricting all week, that your body's like, okay, well now we're going to just go crazy. And with that as well is if we, you know, have it's when there's all that stress, you know, the body is going to, you're going to have a bigger appetite. You're going to be able to eat more because the body's kind of like, finally, she's giving me food. So I'm just going to keep, trying to get her to eat as much as possible.
Yeah. So with your group of people that you come to you, what are like the common issues?
Yeah. So usually they come to us with we have a 500-point symptom assessment we go through. So and we look at that with their bloods too, but most of the time when people reach out to us, it is suffering from debilitating fatigue, brain fog. Pretty much everybody has either been diagnosed or suffering from anxiety and depression, and the chronic gut issues. So bloating, like looking 9 months pregnant, constipation is a big one as well. Some girls not going to the bathroom for 2-3 days, sometimes even more. They're probably the two biggest ones, to be honest. And then that has a flow-on effect. And like a lot of girls are quick to go, oh, it's my hormones, there's something wrong with them, that's why I can't lose body fat. You know, it's like, well, what are you doing? Are you giving your body the nutrients to actually support your hormones, to get your thyroid working optimally? Or are we starving yourself, overtraining? Or are you eating a really poor diet, processed food? Do you have really high stress? Are you not sleeping properly? So these are kind of the basic things that we need to tick off as well beforehand. But usually fatigue, gut health issues, and a lot of cycle issues as well. So a lot of girls with irregular periods or chronic period pain, endometriosis, PCOS, but that's usually coupled with fatigue and gut issues as well. Yeah,
and it's all connected, right? Like, I wanted to go back to the gut issues. So this is something that like comes up so often, and a lot of girls complain about either being bloated or like not going to the toilet, and that's not healthy, right? Like, how do we combat that as well? And what is the first thing that you would look at if someone came to you and you're like, I'm really bloated all the time, and you know, I probably only go to the toilet once every 4 days?
So figuring out those questions on like, okay, when are you bloating? Like, are you waking up bloated and you're bloating all day? Do you wake up lean and then you start eating and you get bloated? is the bloating low and hard and pregnant looking, or are you bloating in the upper abdominal area? And if it can't be, if it's not triggered by food or anything like that, then it's like, okay, maybe there's got to be something underlying here. So with that, looking at bloods and obviously we look at bloods very differently to a GP. So, your GPs have got their conventional ranges that are based on the average of the population that get tested. Their job is to diagnose and treat disease. That is not at all what we're doing. So we look at it from a completely different lens. We use ranges that are a lot more narrow, and we're not looking at things in isolation, but we're cross-correlating that with their symptoms. So I can kind of see in their bloods, okay, I can see there's potentially markers of bacterial overgrowth here, but I can't see, like, is there SIBO, is there Klebsiella, Citrobacter, is there Candida? That's when I'm looking at their kind of symptoms to go, okay, well, I can see that she's struggling with FODMAPs, she's reacting to garlic and onion, she's craving carbohydrates, she's waking up multiple times in the night, she's got bad breath. Okay, maybe we are dealing with SIBO, which is a collection of various bacteria that can be overgrown. If they're similar symptoms, but we're finding that, okay, there's skin issues, dermatitis, flaky skin on the bottom of the feet, dandruff, maybe bacterial vaginosis, maybe we're looking at more kind of candida there. So that's kind of how we would look at that. And then we also want to see, okay, is there potentially leaky gut going on too? So we can use a visual marker screen for that as well. Do they have like a white coating on their tongue, lateral serrations on their tongue? Is there markers in their bloods of leaky gut? Is there autoimmune disorders, which with anything autoimmune that's typically can be driven from leaky gut? So kind of figuring out, okay, what is the driver here, and then going from there. But if, a lot of these girls that we do see are already eating healthy, or what's perceived as healthy, they are training, they're still having these problems. But if you're having all of these issues and you've got, a highly processed diet, or you're not eating enough, then we would need to start there. It's like, okay, cool. Well, let's clean up your diet first and see if that actually fixes the problem. If it doesn't, then we need to look at what potentially could be underlying there.
Yeah. And like, I'm going to say, like, do you find a lot of people like encounter these problems if they were, say, going out on the weekend and, eating quote unquote, like less nutritious foods or whatever? Is that usually what you would see? Like, these
absolutely,
people,
like, where we've got in our gut, obviously we've got our good kind of microbes, and we've got our pathogenic microbes. And these pathogenic microbes in it, they're usually fine. When everything's in balance, there's no issue. But the issue is when our kind of good microbes start to decrease, and then that allows the opportunity for these pathogenic bacteria to overgrow. So with our good microbes, what feeds them is really like, your plant-based foods, nuts, seeds. So if we're not eating a lot of nutritious food, vegetables, fruits, nuts and seeds, we're not going to be feeding that good gut bacteria, and that's going to allow that bad bacteria to overgrow. We've also got alcohol. Alcohol does cause bacterial imbalances and dysbiosis in the gut. It can actually drive leaky gut as well. So if we are binge drinking every weekend, or having drinking every night, heaven forbid, then that can drive that as well. Antibiotic use, so frequent antibiotic use, is also something that can wipe out those good microbes. So if somebody's constantly on antibiotics, that's probably a sign that there's potentially some dysbiosis there. Aracatane is a massive one that really disrupts the gut flora. So stress disrupts the gut flora as well. So there's so many things in our environment that can be impacting that. And if we're then not feeding our good gut microbes with healthy, nutritious food, plenty of vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds, then we're kind of predisposing ourselves for dysbiosis and issues down the line.
What is dysbiosis for everyone listening?
Dysbiosis is that imbalance of bacteria in the gut. So when that with bacterial overgrowth essentially in there.
And what's the relation from like your gut to, say, like your hormones? Like what happens there for hormones to be kind of dysregulated from like your gut problems?
So pretty much most all hormones need to kind of pass through the gut. One of the biggest ones is obviously estrogen. So we do see a lot of estrogen dominance with the girls that have dysbiosis and girls that are constipated as well. So when obviously when we pass stool, we are getting rid of excess hormones like estrogen. We're getting rid of toxins. We're getting rid of well, pretty much anything. That's how we kind of detoxify. So if we're constipated and there's gut dysbiosis, and that excess estrogen can just get back into circulation. And then we start having problems with estrogen dominant symptoms, which could be, you know, excessive mental chatter, struggling losing fat, particularly around the triceps, the hips, the lower body, headaches, migraines, really bad PMS. And when we see estrogen dominance, obviously that can be then coupled with low progesterone, because progesterone will kind of lower itself to protect itself against the harmful effects of excess estrogen. And then progesterone is a very calming hormone. So if we lack progesterone, we're more likely to have issues with anxiety, more likely to have issues with sleep, and that can obviously disrupt our cycle. Energy levels as well, that can affect it too. So with, and then there is pretty big connection with the thyroid, with the gut as well. So I cannot actually remember the mechanism, but there's a link there for sure, especially with low stomach acid, which is another thing we often see. So that can be then low stomach acid and gut issues can then now start to cause issues with low thyroid function. Now, if there is like leaky gut going on or dysbiosis, and we're not able to absorb nutrients well, and then we start having issues with not getting enough iodine or not absorbing iodine, selenium, which are essential for thyroid function, then we're going to see issues with low thyroid. Same thing with any other nutrients. If we're not able to absorb them well, then that's going to have a flow-on effect to other hormones and other organs. So I don't usually, I mean, it's always that like what came first, the chicken or the egg type situation with a lot of people. So we don't not necessarily always starting with the gut, but often for a lot of people, that is often where we need to start, to be honest.
Yeah, especially like cleaning up your diet, as you said, and looking at like stress as well. And a lot of people, like, I guess in your early 20s, I don't know what you sound like you're a busy person in 20s. But I think a lot of us like high stress and not understanding the connection through, you know, high stress and our health. So what is the connection between like, you know, busyness or like, you know, physical stress, mental stress, emotional stress, and, you know, our health?
Yeah. So if you're like, obviously some stress, you know, is good. You know, cortisol is good to build muscle tissue and burn fat, but the issue is when there is chronic stress over time. So this can pretty much affect every organ. If you're constantly in a state of fight or flight, then your body is primarily concerned with some like fight or flight, basically. So the blood is going to be going to the limbs to get you ready for that. It's not going to be very concerned with digestion and assimilation of food. So digestion, and this is why eating in a stress state or rushing your food down or eating on the go can cause digestive issues as well, because your body's not primarily concerned with digesting that food. It's got other things going on. So stress is probably one of the biggest factors. And a couple of the strategies we use is like getting people to take 3 deep breaths before they eat, making sure that they're chewing their food 30 to 40 chews per mouthful, making sure they're being mindful with their food, they're at a designated eating zone, they're not watching TV or anything like that or playing on their computer when they're eating. So we are fully in that rest and digest state. But when we are in a state of chronic stress, that can also lower our thyroid function. We can see issues with pretty much every single organ, to be honest. It's definitely one of the biggest problems that we see, for sure. And then over time we can see low estrogen, low progesterone. We can run into cycle issues as well.
And it is like cortisol is one of those ones like that you do need, but it's like in context, right? Like when do you find that cortisol is the highest in your body?
When?
In the morning?
Where? So it is so it's obviously secreted by the adrenal glands. So there is the whole term of adrenal fatigue gets thrown around, but that's actually kind of been debunked now in the literature as it doesn't really exist. And now they're talking more of it being like HPA axis dysfunction. So we've got the hypothalamus and the pituitary and the adrenal glands that communicate with one another. So if we are in a state of chronic stress all the time, we can see dysfunction through there. So it's not necessarily that your adrenals are not pumping out more like cortisol, it's just that there's some sort of dysfunction through that HPA axis that's affecting it.
And what does call so adrenal fatigue is not necessarily a thing. It was just was it like something that they were thinking like was like a syndrome or something, or like?
Yeah, I think it was like based on the fact they thought like over in periods of chronic stress that the adrenals kind of just stopped pumping cortisol, basically. So now, from what I understand, I'm pretty sure there's other mechanisms that are involved in that, not necessarily just the adrenal glands that are getting tanked, but coming from the brain essentially as well.
So that's honestly one thing that I hear so often, or even just jumping into my inbox, people like, I have adrenal fatigue. And I was like, I don't know. But like, that's not my wheelhouse. But where would you go with someone that, says that they have adrenal fatigue? What would you look at with those people?
So same kind of thing is like, okay, what is their kind of lifestyle like at the moment? Like, what are they doing? How much are they training? What is their stress like? How much are they eating? First thing I would probably be looking at tackling is firstly probably increasing their food, getting them eating more, getting them training less, getting them focusing on more stress management strategies to try and combat that. Obviously, we want to look at micronutrients as well. So things like B vitamins are really important for the adrenals and to cope with stress. Magnesium is also really important. So are there any deficiencies there that we need to look at supporting? And then we may also need, potentially in the interim, some sort of adaptogenic herb to help the body cope with stress. So an adaptogenic herb could be like ashwagandha is a really good one. Rhodiola rosea is great, withania. So these basically just tell the brain that the stress you're under is not life-threatening and just trying to calm down. It can help get that cortisol curve kind of back to where we want it. So ideally, cortisol, as we wake up, it's meant to go in line with the sun. So we wake up, cortisol increases, it slowly increases throughout the day, and then it slowly comes down as the sun comes down. Then melatonin increases as in the evening as cortisol comes down, so we can get ready for sleep. Now, one of the biggest issues we see is because like I said, cortisol goes in line with the sun, is we get home from work, we turn on all these lights, we're, on our phone, watching TV, getting all this blue light exposure. So cortisol is still up. So that doesn't allow melatonin to increase. So then we start running into issues with sleep. And we can also see sometimes if someone does have gut pathogens, bacterial overgrowth or parasites, in a saliva test, they may actually have a really high morning cortisol reading. And this is actually what I had. My morning cortisol was like really high, and but I would wake up like dead. Like I'm telling you, I'm not springing out of bed like at all. Now pathogens are nocturnal, so they tend to be kind of alive and causing a ruckus at night, which is why in the morning the stress response of cortisol is quite high, which is why mine was high in the morning, and then it completely plummeted for the rest of the day. So that is pretty another, I guess, how stress and the gut can also be related. Because if we want to figure out what are the stresses, like if there is gut dysfunction and there's pathogens and dysbiosis, that is a stressor to the body. So we need to deal with that. That could be contributing to that, those adrenal issues and that fatigue and that HPA axis dysfunction. So we need to kind of tackle that to sort that out as well. And then lifestyle is the biggest thing. And if people, like even when we are working with our clients, we have to have stress management stuff through the entire process, because if we're not, again, if the root cause of all of your dysfunction is coming from stress to the body, whether that's working a lot, not sleeping, having kids, like so much going on, then we need to focus on not necessarily decreasing the stress, but improving your perception of stress and your ability to cope with stress. Because we can do all the nutrition, supplementation, everything in the world, but at the end, if you have not dealt with that, then in 6 months' time, all your issues are just going to come back.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons people do have reoccurring problems. They may feel really good, in the period that they're working with a practitioner, and then when they're finished, they haven't actually changed their lifestyle or improved their perception of stress, changed their behaviors and their mindset. So they go back to what they were doing and they end up in the same position 6 months later.
Yeah, and I think that's a big one, especially I work with a lot of women and mums and things like that, and like they can't change the situation that they're in. Like they have kids, they go to work, like it's all stressful at times. But it, like you said, it's changing the perception of it and giving them tools to be able to better manage that stress rather than being like, this is my life and I hate it, and or like it's stressful and that's it. Like this is my life for the rest of my life.
And you've got to be able to control the variables that you can control.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, yes, hectic lifestyle, kids, working, everything. What is it that you can actually do today? Like, can you prep your meals so they're ready to go? Can you find some time to do some meditation or some go for a walk? Like, what are the variables that we can control? If it's okay, you can't get to the gym because stuff's hectic, that's okay. But what other variables that we have in place can you actually do today? And I think obviously a lot of women, we have that all or nothing approach, and we have that perfectionism personality trait, and we feel like if we can't do it all, then we can't do anything.
Yeah.
And over time, changing that behavior and that mindset is really, it's difficult, but it is really important, because otherwise it's like as soon as shit hits the fan, and if you've got kids, things could change daily. You never know what could happen. And you just throw it all out the window and you're back to square one because you feel like I can't do it all, so I'm going to do nothing. So it's better to do one or two things than do nothing and kind of give up on yourself.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Okay, so what I would love to touch on is 3 ways to improve sleep and therefore improve stress, I guess.
Yeah, I always look at when people are struggling to get results, I always look at stress, sleep, nutrition, and training as 4 legs to a stool. If one falls off, the whole stool kind of falls over. So you can have the best nutrition and training in the world, but if you're still high stress and not sleeping, we're going to really struggle to get any results and to heal. And obviously when we sleep, this is when our body is repairing itself, repairing all systems. So improving sleep, number 1 is no electronics 2 hours before bed.
That's so hard for a lot of people.
It's so hard for a lot of people, but definitely we need to have more rules around our phone. And I was actually reading something last night about, I think it was called TikTok brain. And I mean, I don't use TikTok, but basically we are getting dumber and dumber because we're always on our phone. We're looking at these meaningless things, and it actually can affect our brain chemistry and I think showing like it can potentially decrease gray matter, which is like a really important part of the brain for cognitive function. So having rules around your phone is so important, not just for your mental health, for your sleep, being present. Like it is really important to have those rules around it and not be scrolling mindlessly before bed. That's a lot of the reason why a lot of people will struggle with their sleep. Secondly is making sure you are sleeping in a dark room, no kind of light coming in. Then getting sunlight first thing, within the first 90 minutes of waking. So as soon as you wake up in the morning, we are starting your prep for that night's sleep. So get up, do your morning routine, go for a walk, get out into the sun, try and get that direct sunlight onto your eyes. That has been shown to really improve sleep as well. And then one more for you.
I mean, you can increase the number of points if you have more.
Yes, exactly. But and then caffeine obviously intake as well. So not having any caffeine after about 1:30 p.m. To make sure you can get a good night's sleep as well.
Yeah. And I guess like so many people's problems, right? Like they go to the gym at probably 4 o'clock, have a hit of pre-workout, but they've already had 2 coffees during the day. And then they're scrolling on their phone at 9 p.m. before they fall asleep. Do you think like reading a book before bed is like appropriate? Or
Definitely. Yeah, I definitely try and get a lot of my clients to read books before bed. And like the thing about like caffeine is like great research around it improving performance, but what it's actually doing is over the course of the day, we increase something called adenosine, which is essentially sleep pressure. So over the course of the day, adenosine builds up. Caffeine just inhibits adenosine. So it's just reducing that feeling of sleep pressure essentially. And that's kind of what it's doing, which is why, and the more we have, the more we end up needing to have. So you might start with 1 coffee, and then over time you need 2, and then like all of a sudden like you're having pre-workout and all these stimulants throughout the day, and that is going to have a massive detriment to your sleep. And also at the end of the day, caffeine does drive up cortisol as well. Pre-workout, I think, is one of the worst things ever. Most people don't need it. Like, to be honest, an espresso does more than enough to get you going. But obviously a lot of them are put like a lot of different additives in there. I'm always unsure like how truthful the labels are on what's actually in there. I remember like 10 years ago, so many of them were on the market and then getting taken off the market because they found like methamphetamine in them. Like,
100%, yeah.
Like,
slowly
it's crazy.
one by one.
Yeah. Like, I don't mind a good, like, beta-alanine, citrulline malate.
Yeah.
They're really great before training. I think they're fantastic. Or there's some good non-stim pre-workouts around as well. But most people, for the general person who's just wanting to lose body fat, you don't need a pre-workout. If you're prepping for bodybuilding shows and all that kind of stuff, it might be a different story for that person. But most people, a shot of coffee to get you going is going to be more than enough.
Honestly, like you said, like the more that you have, the more that you keep needing. And I think that's like the sad truth about it is like when you start going, especially I've experienced this, like I think I've competed like 14 times or something. And at the start, like I was like, I'll have a pre-workout to get up, and then I'll have a pre-workout to train, and then I'll have a pre-workout to do cardio. And at night I was just like
oh yeah, you're just a zombie.
Yeah.
And I've spoke to girls in the past who are just having pre-workout in the day to get through.
Yeah.
Like, not even training. And it's like, okay, let's look at why you're struggling so much with energy. Are we dealing with nutrient deficiencies, gut dysfunction, low thyroid function? Like, what's actually going on that's causing this level of fatigue? And let's actually deal with that instead of just masking it with caffeine and pre-workout.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I think like the vitamins thing is something really good to touch on. Like, I know that there's a few vitamins that I would definitely recommend to my clients, but like just the general client coming to you, I pretend like I'm that person. I have a pretty good diet. Like, I don't drink too much. I'm probably once a month or something. Like, what vitamins would you be looking at for me if I was coming to you and I was like, oh, I'm probably a little bit tired. Like, I'm not too bad, but just general.
Yeah, great question. The more I learn about blood work and the more I learn about supplements, the actually more cautious I am now with giving recommendations of supplements, because you can actually so easily fuck somebody up by giving them something wrong and not understanding their physiology. So, but our kind of basics are going to be magnesium, massively. So magnesium is involved in over 600 enzymatic processes in the body. It has been used to treat depression, anxiety. It helps reduce stress. It improves sleep. It assists with COMT expression, which is how we break down estrogen in the body. So if particularly around our periods, like, we need more magnesium because we have got a breaking down, need more COMT expression is kind of going on. Particularly if you crave chocolate leading into your period, it's usually a sign of magnesium deficiency, and that's kind of what your body is needing. So magnesium is a massive one. Plus, for athletes, we're depleting so much magnesium through training. So that is one of my staples. Usually a good B complex, an all-rounder. So Thorne do a few different ones, and then you've got all your kind of Bs in there, and at least you're taking care of that. B is also important for reducing stress. B6 in particular is really effective for PMS, especially if you get a lot of psychological symptoms around your cycle. That can be a sign of B6 deficiency. B12, obviously really important. So a good all-rounder B complex can be good. Fish oil is probably another one as well. So, or cod liver oil, which is great too, because cod liver, you're going to get a little bit more fat soluble vitamins, so vitamin A, a little bit of D, E, and K in there as well. And then you've got your omega-3s, which most people are low in, to reduce inflammation, improve energy levels, and look after like that aspect as well. They're probably my 3 go-tos. And then from there would kind of depend on bloods if we would look at adding in zinc or vitamin D or anything like that.
Yeah. So vitamin D wouldn't be one of the like your general one. Is there a problem with giving vitamin D?
Look, so the conventional range for vitamin D is 50 and above. So anything below 50 you're considered deficient. I think that is far too low. In fact, like 10, 15 years ago, the conventional range was over 100. But
Yeah.
as a population, we are so deficient in vitamin D, and because the conventional ratings are based on the average, that has been dropped. Now, my range for vitamin D, where I like to see our clients, is 175 to 225, because vitamin D plays a massive role in thyroid health, in gut health. It's been used really effectively with patients with IBD, energy levels. It just ticks so many boxes. So it is definitely a staple, I would say, but the dose would depend on where their bloods are at. So I don't always like giving it unless I've definitely got a blood. If I'm thinking they've got low vitamin D, so if they've got like dry skin on their shins, or it's painful to brush their hair, that can be a sign of low vitamin D. Or even if they have fat digestion issues, because obviously vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. So if there are issues with digesting fats, heartburn, cracked lips, pain on the right side of the shoulder blade, that can indicate potentially fat digestion issues, which may also mean there could be low vitamin D if we cannot absorb fat soluble vitamins due to those digestive issues. So I think like 3,000 IUs is always pretty safe if you don't know. I have seen people with 1,000 IUs isn't really going to do a hell of a lot to anybody. But depending on the person, if they're really low, we can go quite high, which might be 5,000 to 10,000 IUs. But there's a lot of contingencies you need to do in place with that, as well as monitoring them as well, to make, because we don't want vitamin D excess. But toxicity won't really happen to about 300-400. But again, if you're going those high dose vitamins D, you need to be working with somebody that understands it and knows what to look for, and to make sure that is for you. And vitamin D, 1 in 2 people with vitamin D deficiency also tend to have depression. Yeah. So we know there's a link there as well with vitamin D. So it's something that I do recommend everybody look at getting tested quite regularly. And I have had so I actually have a gene where I do struggle to uptake vitamin D. And I kind of figured that because I've always struggled with low vitamin D. My brother's always struggled. My sister's always struggled. I'm thinking, there seems to be a genetic link here. Yeah. And then I got a DNA test done, which was super interesting, and that came back. And I remember getting my bloods done a couple of years ago, super low vitamin D. Once I got that in range, I could not believe the difference it made for me. Like, I hadn't changed my nutrition or training at all. I dropped 3 kilos just from getting my vitamin D up. My energy was insane. I couldn't nap in the day anymore. I was waking up with energy, and I was like, wow, this is insane. And even there's studies showing with vitamin D, there's a relationship there with fat loss, because there was a study done, I think it was in overweight women, and they were all in a calorie deficit, and they found that the women that were deficient in vitamin D didn't lose as much weight as the women replete in vitamin D. So that's a really underestimated vitamin, I think, as well. And the other thing with vitamin D is, if you need enough magnesium to convert it to its active form. So if you're low in magnesium, you're likely going to be low in vitamin D. We also need cholesterol to assimilate vitamin D from the sun. Now, cholesterol has been so demonized over the past however many years, and most of the bloods that I see have low cholesterol. And low cholesterol is actually a lot more dangerous than high cholesterol, but everybody's got so much fear around it. And we need cholesterol, especially as females, because it makes our sex hormones. We need it for fat digestion. We need to absorb fat soluble vitamins. Cholesterol is super important. So if we are low, that's another problem.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess sometimes from like an outside perspective, it can seem really confusing, like the industry, right? Like at one stage, like fat is bad, and then they're like, no, carbs are bad, and then you're like, where do I sit with this? So it is really hard, but that's why I love your page in particular, because you have so much really good information just about general health stuff. A lot of people's pages these days are very fat loss focused, and they miss the thing of optimizing health and wellness, and that's how we actually achieve weight loss eventually, right? If you're healthy, you're going to be able to lose weight better. If you're healthy, you're going to gain muscle better. So it's about getting that body
if you
healthy.
feel shit, and you're lean, but you feel shit, is it really worth it? Are you really happy? And you've obviously done a ton of bodybuilding shows, so you know what it's like to look amazing, But how do you feel that week leading into your comp?
Yeah, exactly. And like, I honestly, in the last 2 years, have put a whole heap of effort into like exactly what you've talked about through stress management and sleep routines and vitamins and micronutrients. Because a few years ago, and I think you'll probably know this too, like definitely in bodybuilding, it was like you just eat these 3 types of foods, and that is all you get. Like you don't get micronutrients.
No,
You just get
no, no,
chicken.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So and
you just eat chicken, broccoli, and rice and potato, and that's literally it. I remember those days. I'm hoping that it's changed since then, and there's a lot more
we're getting
about
there.
flexible dieting coming out, which is good. But like I said, that's not, for an athlete, you're prepping for a show, it's always easy to stick to something when you've got that big goal. But for the general person, it's just not realistic to stick to that type of stuff. And even with the girls that come to us, I'm like, look, most of them do have a lot of mental issues around food in terms of their relationship with food is really poor. They have really strict, firm dietary rules. And often we may have to put them in a period where we do have some restriction, but ultimately the goal is to get you to be able to flexible diet so you can consume all the foods you like, you can eat out, there isn't any limit on what you kind of can't eat, but we may have to do some groundwork first where yes, some things may be off limits while we deal with this, but ultimately the goal is to get you to be able to flexible diet, improve that relationship with food. We need all of our macronutrients. Like, the low fat thing is so dangerous. And I even have a lot of girls come to me and they'll be eating like half, minimum 1 gram per kilo of body weight in fat per day. That's the minimum that we kind of would put somebody on, unless there's gallbladder issues or fat digestion issues. But a lot of girls will come to me eating like 0.5 grams per kilo of body weight. And like they weigh 60 kilos and they're eating 30 grams of fat a day. And I'm like, are you having period issues, cycle issues? Like we need fat for cognitive function, hormone creation, reducing inflammation. It also works as a lubricant in the digestive system to help with moving food through. And a lot of people are just not eating anywhere near as much fat. And then you've also got on the flip side, people also trying to cut out carbs. We're running out of food here.
We just eat protein.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's and like a lot of even the clients that I have that are on quote unquote low carb diet are like, but this is so many carbs. What do you mean this is low carb? And I'm like, well, technically your fat percentage is higher than the carb percentage. So this to me is like a low carb diet. Even if you're eating 150, 170 grams of carbs a day, we're eating kind of more fat. Low carb, most people associate with no carb. They're like, oh, well, it's, not eating any carbs. And for us females, like it just doesn't work for us at all in terms of, and like there's some people that thrive on, like keto, and for some people that is necessary 100%. There's definitely a place for every diet. But for most girls, it's just going to exacerbate a poor relationship with food. They're going to get those cravings. They're going to end up binging.
Yeah, especially for those girls that they do love carbs, but like they're trying to do it as a way of calorie restriction, or like pulling out one macro group is going to achieve weight loss. But as we know, it's like it is total calories, and then being able to have like what's appropriate for you, but also what's going to work better for you long term. Like I think that's the biggest one, is like what can you stick to for a long period of time? And that's definitely not low carb for a lot of people. Like you said, there are groups of people that can and that love that, but it is like very few and far in between.
Yeah, 100%. And like, when we are going in and dealing with bacterial overgrowth and getting rid of, we may go low carb in that period, because obviously a lot of bacteria can feed on high carbohydrate foods. So we may have to strip some of them out temporarily while we're kind of starving that bacteria and getting rid of it. But then we are looking at implementing that straight back in. So it just depends on where we're at, what phase we're kind of in, and the goals of that. And one of the other biggest issues I see when girls are trying to heal their gut is there's no periodization at all. So they might see practitioners and they just get thrown on, okay, here, take all these supplements, and like they've got one supplement for leaky gut, one supplement for getting rid of bacteria, like one supplement for, I don't know, something else like hormones. And it's like, well, what's the goal here? Like each, just like our training, we periodize our training, we have different training goals, we have our accumulation, intensification phases. We have to do the same with our nutrition and our supplementation. So for us, I'm like, okay, cool, we're flagging that we can see this leaky gut. We need to focus on that for, 6 or so weeks. Then we might go in and deal with the bacteria. Then we've got to build that bacteria up. Then if we're still running into hormone issues, we need to build that back up. We need to sort that then. and making sure that that's all periodized to the person and they're hitting the goals of each kind of phase. And even the training comes into that. So for us as well, if you're coming to me, you've got a ton of symptoms, a ton of gut issues, no, you're not going to be doing a bro split in the gym every day. No, you're not going to be doing HIIT training every single day. You may have to do, depending how bad it is and how much stress is going on, walking and yoga for 6 weeks, and then, or maybe just a really full body, 3 sessions a week, low volume, low intensity training sessions, just focusing on reducing inflammation, so we can get you into a position where you can actually handle a hard training session and we can actually push you in the gym. But there's no, if we're, I've had girls before where we're trying to heal their gut, but they're going and doing CrossFit or something every day. And I'm like, well, it's 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Like, we're, really just going around in a circle here. We need to pull back on that and introduce that at the right time.
Yeah, because I think especially I've been in this situation as well, like you have as well, just the overtraining aspect. Well, not overtraining, but just like the increase of stress and fatigue on the body, and not having the relationship with, hey, that actually correlates to this, and then this correlates to this, and it's all connected. Because I think, especially a lot of people think your mental state, your emotional state, and your physical stuff is all separate, but it's not. It's it's all together, it's all in there, and you just need to work on if you're working on these gut health, you bring down stress and fatigue, and that's coming from your training, but it's also coming from lifestyle factors as well. So it all works together, and it's beauty of it, but also pain in the ass, but it is how it is, Yeah,
exactly. And if you've gotten into a position where your health, you're having all these symptoms and your health is just absolutely trashed, and it's okay, well, we need to now change this, because what the choices that you have made in the past, overtraining, yo-yo dieting, oral contraceptive pill, antibiotic use, bendering every single weekend, for what, 5-10 years, however long, we now need to reverse all of that. And that's not going to happen in 12 weeks. Some people, that's not going to happen in 6 months. So it is going to take work. But at the end of the day, you've got to acknowledge, okay, what has got you into this position in the first place? Now we need to change all of that. Which is because you're changing habits that people have had for 10, 15 or so years, and trying to reverse that. And a lot of people do expect that, I should feel better. It's been 8 weeks. It's well,
a week.
How long? Did you kind of suffer before this? And how long have you been practicing self-abandonment and putting other people before you, or people pleasing tendencies, or whatever it is, and neglected yourself? And now this is going to take a long time to deal with.
Yeah, and this is so true. Actually, I have one of my coaches, I'm gonna throw under the bus. She's much like this, had a really busy early 20s, teens, and then had all these gut issues, hormonal issues, and then now it's she's good now, but it took a good 12 months to get that sorted. So it wasn't an overnight. And I remember just battling through it with her, and she was like, why, I should feel better by now, this should be fixed. I'm like, no, honey, we got 20 years of fuckery, essentially.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Reverse that. I think some people I think can handle it to a degree, and then do you find some people are quite sensitive to that kind of stuff? Some people can come out of it and they're like, I just partied for 6 years and now I'm fine. And then some people be like, I'm a mess.
And it's hard as well, having those conversations where they are ticking every box and they're doing everything right, and those improvements are slow. Mentally, that's so difficult for a lot of people when you're doing everything right, but you're not seeing those results. And it's we just have to keep pushing and keep going and being consistent. And most girls as well, we need to see those body composition changes to keep us motivated and to keep us moving forward, which is why I usually do frame a conversation of we will get there, but we may have to spend 6 or so months just working on this. And the girls that I've worked with that have done that, who've just gone, all right, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to focus. And we've gotten to that point where we can focus on body composition. They usually drop in the first part, but they drop so much easier when we can now focus on that, and it completely changes their life, and their habits have been completely changed because they've been sticking to it for over 6 months. So it's easy for them to keep going. They understand their body. They know what triggers them. They know when, okay, I've had a stressful period, that might be why this is happening. And that full body and self-awareness, and that building that quantitative and qualitative awareness around nutrition and your lifestyle is just so vital in that, so they can actually not only get their results, but keep them over time and sustain that. Exactly.
Well, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'm so happy to do for you to do like a shameless plug because you're incredible with what you do. So where can people find you? And yeah.
You can follow me on Instagram at mandyhopper_MHP. More than welcome to send me an email at mandy@mhperformancecoaching.com or visit our website at www.mhperformancecoaching.com, which is all on my Instagram. So if you just go there, you can just go anywhere really. But
There's links and stuff. But thank you so much for, talking today. There's so many good points of, interest there. And I think a lot of people will get a lot out of that. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored and I'm so grateful to be here. So thank you.
Thanks, Ed.